Hello and welcome to this Lee Academy's Trust training video. Today we're going to talk about NotebookLM and how it can support your teaching. NotebookLM is a research and note-taking online tool by Google that uses Gemini artificial intelligence to assist you with interacting with a range of resources that you specify. You can get to it by going to notebooklm.google.com and that will take you here. You can see that we haven't got any notebooks yet, so let's click on Create to get going. You can see that our page has been split into three sections. We've got sources on the left, a chat box in the middle, and something called Studio on the right. Let's start by adding a source. You can upload in the free version of NotebookLM up to 50 sources with a word limit each of 500,000 words or 200 megabytes. You can upload PDFs or MP3s, for instance, but you can also link it to things in your Google Drive, your Google Docs or slides. You can also link it to websites or YouTube videos, and you can also paste text in. It's worth noting that with the Google Drive, it's not going to make any changes to your docs or your slides. It's just going to create a little local copy that it can read from. And then if you make changes to those in the future, NotebookLM will prompt you asking if you'd like to sync the new versions over. With websites, it's going to pull all the text from a website. It's not going to read images or videos, or it's not going to be able to click on links inside the web page. It'll just pull the text over. Same with YouTube, it reads the captions that are generated for the video. So whether they're uploaded by the user or if they're created by AI, it reads the captions. So I'm just going to upload a website for the moment. It's going to link it to this ebook and it's going to pull all of that information over. And in a moment, you're going to see in the middle of our screen a little summary of what it's found from that resource. And it's going to give the notebook a title, here we are, as well as a little image that it thinks represents the text as well. So now we can start interacting with these resources. We've got a text box down the bottom here where we can start asking NotebookLM some questions. It's also suggested some questions already that it thinks might be interesting based on what it has read. But let's type our own. So it's going to have a little think. And then it's going to give us a response. Now the main difference between this and something like ChatGPT or Gemini, aside from being able to pull from very specific resources, is that it will cite its answers. So you see these numbers next to its answers. If we hover over them, it will give us a little preview of what it has found in our source. And if we click on it, it will go into the source and highlight where it has got that information from. So we can really double check the answers that we're getting. We can close our expanded source by clicking on this Close Source View button. Now, it's also worth noting that in this chat box, these responses are only temporary for the moment. The next time that we come into NotebookLM, this chat box will be refreshed. If we want to save any responses for future reference, we need to click Save to Note. Doing so will keep it over here and we can have up to 1,000 notes saved, so there's plenty of room. You can also copy the response to your clipboard, or you can also give feedback for good or bad responses. So here's a great example of why creating notes is a good idea. I needed to refresh my browser, and now I've lost everything that was in my chat box. However, because I saved it as a note, that information is still available to me. So let's have a look at the studio now. Up the top, we've got Audio Overview, where you can see we can create a deep dive conversation between two AI-generated hosts. Now, if I click Generate, we can just create a general overview of our sources, and they'll have a discussion about it. I can click Customize, though, and give them something to focus on if I do want to. But for the moment, I'm just going to click Generate and let that work in the background. So, Notes. We can click Add Note, and that will allow us to create a new, just blank note that we want to use. Every time a note is created, you've got this Convert to Source button, which will turn it into something that will go over into our source library, and it can then refer back to as well. So I can create additional materials for it to refer back to from there. underneath we've got these features. So Study Guide. Study Guide creates an outline of key concepts and principles from the resources, creates short answer quizzes and answer keys, generates essay questions, here we are, and can create a glossary of key terms as well. Could be really handy, nice quick resource to create. We've got a briefing doc, which again it summarizes the key concepts of the source into a more digestible fashion. But it's just the basic outline of what you've got. It doesn't have the essay questions. Here we are, for instance, but it does have quite a nice dive into, say, here we are, the characters of this story, the themes, the plot points, foreshadowing. A nice overview there. FAQ pulls out some key questions from the resource that might arise. And then we've also got timeline, which is particularly useful for books and historical resources and creates a timeline from that information. So here we've got the FAQ. So it's had a little look, it's had a little think about what the most interesting questions might be, and it's given us some example answers. And here's our timeline. We've got a timeline of the main event that's been generated, as well as the characters that have been featured in it. Now you notice that I've been clicking on this little close note view button. If you don't want a note anymore, you've also got this bin button to delete it. I'm just going to close the note view. A couple of other little things that you might have noticed but I haven't used are these collapsing source panel buttons and collapsing studio buttons. And this means if we click them, we've got a little bit more room in our chat box if we need that additional space. Our audio overview has finished generating, so let's give it a listen.
All right, get ready because today we are taking a deep dive into Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh, a classic.
We've got excerpts from the novel itself, but we're not just going to skim absolutely.
Basil represents a kind of romantic idealism, while Lord Henry is much more cynical.
It's a clash of ideologies for sure. And then there's Dorian, tragic, and it speaks to that destructive power of selfish love, doesn't it?
It really does, and it's this tragedy that sets the real horror of Dorian's wish in motion.
So you can hear it's quite engaging. There's also an interactive mode, which lets you interrupt the hosts and ask them questions.
All right, get ready because today we are taking a deep dive into Oscar Wilde. Oh, hey there, what's up?
Hi, I was wondering what the painting represents in this story.
That's a great question.
Yeah, let's unpack this.
In a nutshell, you could say it represents Dorian's soul.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's this visual manifestation of his inner self.
So as he sins, the painting reflects that.
Exactly. It's like Wilde is showing us what happens when someone
So you can hear there are a couple of little audio artifacts in there, but on the whole it's really good at responding to what you want. Now you can download this audio overview with the More Options button. You've also got the option to change the playback speed here or delete it if you want to go again. Now this is quite a short overview. Sometimes depending on the amount of sources that you've got and the length of them, it can get a little bit longer. Now all of this came from just one single source. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a second source. I'm going to add a second website. And I'm going to start getting the chatbot to compare the two. So that's going to load up. And I'm going to ask it, how do the two stories discuss the theme of selfishness? It's going to pull from both of those, and here we can see it's got an overview for my question. Again, we've got those sources that have been linked, it's been cited. And again, I can save this if I want to make sure I've got it for the future. So here's an example of how we can use NotebookLM in a broader context. I've received 3 files relating to inclusive education and I've put them into NotebookLM. I've generated an audio overview so I can listen to that on my way to work, but remembering that AI is still in its infancy, it's still not perfect. I can't take absolutely everything at face value. I'll still need to go through my sources. But I've also generated a briefing doc and an FAQ, which really helps pinpoint the key aspects of these sources. And I've also got my chat box. I can ask it questions and it will pull it from all 3 sources to answer my questions that I have. I've got my example questions down the bottom here to get me started. As we can see here, it's citing all 3 sources to get my information. To finish off, you can share notebooks with each other as well. So someone has shared this mathematics assessment notebook with me, and while I can't generate an audio overview or create these quick notes here, I can still interact with the sources that have been put in. I can still click on them and have a look and see what's in them. It's still generating a little source guide for me about what they are. And I can still use the chat box to create these answers based on the sources that have been uploaded. So thank you, Carla from Edfleet for this, and thank you, Kyle from Milestone for the previous example as well. And thank you for watching this video. I really hope that you got something out of it, and if you haven't given NotebookLM a go just yet, give it a try now and see how it can support you in your role.